G'day, Justin Hogg from RightSource here, just sharing a few things today in terms of what we've been working with some clients who are working in the not-for-profit space. And one of the interesting things, this question that's come up a couple of times recently, is as running a not-for-profit, so CEOs and boards and not-for-profits have asked this question, sort of like, should we compete? And it's like a really interesting question because it's not one that I'd really thought of in terms of needing to be asked, but I suppose let's dive into that because it actually unfolds a couple of really key points in terms of how you run your not-for-profit and I suppose that mindset you take in as you're running it. So when you set up a not-for-profit, quite often, and this I suppose comes down to that mindset that we talk about, when you set up a not-for-profit as an individual and you go, okay, I have a purpose that I want to set up an entity to make sure that runs forever and fulfills that purpose. You're not doing it to take over the world. You're not doing it to make a lot of money. You're not doing it to necessarily take out others who are doing it. You're doing it because you've seen a specific need that you think needs to be filled and you want to fill that need. And the need isn't being filled quite often, so there isn't any competition. You're not trying to beat someone else to that, oh, there's a niche there I can fill and I'll make a lot of money. That's not that process. There's a need there that no one else is filling, I'm going to fill that need. So the mindset of setting up a not-for-profit isn't to compete. You're filling a specific need. But in saying that, you still will be competing right at the get-go. You'll be competing for resources. So in terms of good people, directors on your board, competing for funds, whether it's donations or government funding. I suppose you also be competing for, awareness. So to get that message out there that you're trying to get out there, you're still competing with all these other messages that are out there. They might not be specifically on your niche, but that's still noise and it still makes it hard for you to be heard. So you are competing from day dot. Now, okay, all right, yes, but I'm not trying to take out the competition. Okay, let's nod and say yes. As you grow, and what happens in a not-for-profit is you do grow when you're successful. So you're good at what you do. You're filling that niche that you started and you start growing. Now, quite often that niche will be geographically centered. So say you're filling a need in regional Queensland and you're starting to grow. Well, that's great. All of a sudden, you notice that regional New South Wales has the same need, but someone else is doing regional New South Wales. Well, should you grow into New South Wales since there's already someone there? This is the question, and this is where it gets interesting. Well, you don't have to. As long as you're filling your purpose, it's fine. What benefit is there in doing it? Well, sometimes, what if you're doing it better? And I suppose this is the thing that you find a lot in, definitely in sport, but also in business. You'll find these pockets of excellence happen. So why is it that we get, as a nation's will, they'll have 3 or 4 tennis players all of a sudden that are in the top 10, but for years they haven't. Why is that? Well, because what happens, and same in business, like you look at Silicon Valley, why are all the big tech companies in one very close geographical area? Why? It's because of competition, but it's the type of competition. So when you're competing, and when you're competing in good spirit, you're actually always looking at ways to be better so that your competition actually pushes you to do better. When you have no competition, you will still do better, but there's not the same need, the same impetus. But also there's not someone else bringing different ideas to the table. And that's what competition can do. Competition can show you different ways of approaching a problem, different ways of tackling the problem, different ways of executing. By having that competition, you actually allow yourself to do better. So competition's about doing better. And I think from a not-for-profit space, where you can encourage things to be done better, or if you see a way that things can be done better, I think competing and showing others that you can do what you do better is a good thing. In saying that, and this is where I think the conversation gets interesting, sometimes competition, especially in a business sense, is thought of as we need to, dig a hole under the competition and help them collapse, or it's all about making them fail. This is the mindset you have to bring to competition. Competition doesn't have to be that way. There are 2 types. There is that negative, destructive competition where it's about beating and winning. When it's not about winning, when it's about being better, then you're happy for your competition to do better because that's going to push you better. So it's about how you compete is important, but competing in itself from a not-for-profit point of view, I think is fine. And the other, I suppose, recent change to overlay over this is the NDIS changes in the not-for-profit space, where grant-funded not-for-profits who were, I suppose, tied to a geographical or a government area because of their grant funding, now no longer is tied, because the NDIS allows you to do that service wherever you want, wherever there's customers that want to choose you because you do a good service, you can operate. So there is actually an ability to grow and compete on a national level because of the NDIS. Whether you want to or not as a not-for-profit, it's up to you. Whether that achieves your purpose, that's really for you to decide. I suppose the message I'm giving here from trying to give through this video is, as a not-for-profit, I think it's fine to compete against other not-for-profits as long as you're doing it through a constructive and a collaborative mindset, because you can definitely work together and still compete. It's about having that mindset of not winning, but just being better. And for me personally, one of the things that I do like to see, and I think will happen more and more now, is when you start seeing not-for-profits compete against for-profits. This is really interesting. So when a not-for-profit starts competing against for-profits, there can be a really cool ball game. And I think what we're seeing now, especially with there's a more awareness of social impact, especially with the younger generation coming through, really wanting to see the impact that companies make and the social responsibility, and not just being about making money. I think the not-for-profits have a very important role to play in that, because not-for-profits don't have shareholders. They are all about the purpose. So if you want to look at an organization that is all about the social impact, it is not-for-profits. So I think there's a really interesting place to be filled there with not-for-profits. And I think being comfortable to compete on all levels will just make them stronger and ultimately allow them to achieve more of their purpose. So that's a bit of a conversation today in terms of not-for-profits and competing. Happy to have a conversation with you about your not-for-profit and what that might mean for you. If you like this video, also check out the other videos we got on YouTube. A lot of not-for-profit stuff, a lot of things talking about governance and things that might be able to help your not-for-profit just achieve that a little bit more. Otherwise, definitely feel free to subscribe to the channel. Chuck any comments you got down below. I'll definitely try and get back to any comments, any questions you have, or if you want to connect with me through LinkedIn and have a private conversation, happy to do that too. Otherwise, thank you for your time. I appreciate the time and watching this video. It's Justin Hogg from RightSource.